Okay, so today we're just going to be talking around turns around a point, and turns around a point is a ground reference maneuver basically in which we just make a turn around a point and we want to make a circle with a constant radius. So we do this, the reason why we actually learn this maneuver and teach it to private students is we want to understand the wind's effect on our airplane and how that changes our ground track and how we're moving across the ground. So other purposes is, again, just like with every other maneuver, we want to learn to divide our attention between flying the airplane, flying the maneuver, making sure that we're not getting distracted by looking for traffic, but also making sure that we're not, getting too low and slow because I'm just so focused on flying the maneuver. And as well as obviously compensating for wind drift. That's the main point of this maneuver. So some basics we should talk about first is turn rate. And turn rate is basically just how fast we're turning. It's just like what we sound, or just like what it sounds like, and it's affected both by bank angle and airspeed. So say that we keep bank angle constant, for example, if we increase airspeed, or as our ground speed increases, our radius of turn will increase, and as it decreases, radius of turn will decrease. We'll now say that we keep our airspeed constant, but only change the bank angle. So as bank angle increases, it's going to increase, it's going to decrease. As airspeed increases, rate of turn will decrease, and vice versa. So, and we can use that to our advantage, specifically just by changing the bank angle in this maneuver, because we're not changing the airspeed. The wind's doing that for us in order to maintain that constant radius. So another thing we need to talk about, obviously, is wind correction angle and crab angle. As we know, airplanes like to weather vane, and so, for example, if the wind's coming out of here, and we want to maintain a straight track, there's going to be some sort of crab angle. Say that, I don't know, this is the airplane. Doing this won't work because the crosswind is going to push me off to the side. So somewhere in between typically, and there's a equation, and you should know how to find this by now, but there's a wind correction angle we use, and that angle is the angle at which your nose is crabbed into the wing or off of the actual heading you're using or you'd like to go on. And so that's the angle that you use in order to maintain a constant ground track. So we want to make sure, we have a correct wind correction angle, so we're doing the maneuver correctly and keep a constant radius. Another thing is, obviously, you want to make sure we're staying coordinated. We're not trying to use rudder to kind of swing the nose over or try to increase or decrease the rate of turn. And then also we need to keep in mind, in this maneuver, if we have a stronger wind, we'll have to vary our bank angle more. And if, in a perfect world, if we had no wind, we actually would not need to do this maneuver at all, because there'd be no point, right? Because if there's no wind, then we don't need to compensate for anything in terms of wind drift. And we could just keep a constant radii by flying perfect, 30 degrees, 45 degrees, and so, yeah. And then another thing, obviously, we want to make sure we're dividing our attention, as I spoke about, in the purpose. Again, the FAA told us roughly 90% outside, 10% inside. So just most of the time we should be looking outside, flying the maneuver, making sure we're also flying the airplane. So looking at, what we're flying around, making sure we're not hitting any towers or there's no traffic we may, come into conflict with. And also remember, if, for example, we're flying and then we look inside, do our, 10% inside, check inside, see that our altitude is decreased or it seems like we're picking up airspeed. The way we correct for that is not by looking inside and fixing that and trying to climb or whatever. You look back outside, fix it outside, and then look back inside and see if your fixes work. So now actually, about performing this maneuver, these maneuvers are done 600 to 1,000 feet AGL. And what we want to do is select a reference point. So for example, again, typically I start on a road because we're in the Midwest, a lot of cornfields and a lot of roads. So I'll start on a road, and I want to start on the downwind. So I want the wind on my back. So wind's coming from the south. I'm going north. And what I want is I want to find a point that's around half a mile out. So for example, say that, I don't know, we have a nice little abandoned road intersection here. I don't know, right here. That's maybe half a mile out. So the first thing I'd want to do, once I identify that point, is I first want to see, okay, well, obviously you want to make sure there's no hazards here. We have no tall radio antenna towers or obviously we don't want to do this in a populated area over a city or something like that. We don't want to be doing these over a school. And then once we do that, obviously we want to make sure we do the pre-maneuver checklist. So we want to clear the area, do those clearing turns, either 90 to the left and back, or just do a 180-degree turn. So you want to start on the upwind in that case. And then after that, obviously airspeed. There's no set airspeed in the ACS. Just want to be below VA here. So just make sure airspeed is stabilized once you go into this, because you don't want your fluctuating airspeed to mess up the maneuver, because you want your indicator airspeed or true airspeed to stay the same, and just let the wind change the ground speed. So say that this is our plane. We've done the pre-maneuver checklist. Everything looks good. I'm coming up here flying. Once it's off my wing, I'll just go ahead and start a turn. And remember, in this maneuver, maybe 30 degrees of bank roughly. The max, or typically I use 30 or so. I start with 30. But keep in mind that this is going to be our steepest point of bank. So based off what the wind is doing to us and how strong it is, we may want to increase the bank. We can use up to 45 degrees of bank in this maneuver. So we're coming up here, start our turn again. This is going to be our steepest bank because we have a tailwind here. As it slowly transitions into a quartering crosswind, or a quartering tailwind, obviously we're going to decrease it because our ground speed is decreasing. Keep it coming around, and as it turns into a headwind here, we're going to have to obviously take out some of that bank in order to maintain that constant radius. And throughout this whole time, we're obviously also going to be crabbing the airplane. So for example, up here, once it becomes a direct crosswind, we're not actually going to be flying like this. Our nose is going to be offset to the left a little bit in order to keep that ground track, because again, we're going to be crabbed into the wind. And so as we're coming here, ground speed's decreasing, so bank's decreasing because rate of turn obviously going to be decreasing. If we kept the bank angle the same. So anyway, we keep coming here, and now this is slowly turning into a crosswind, so we're losing some of that headwind component. We're going to need to increase the bank. And also keep in mind, our airplane's nose is still banked, it's still crabbed into the wind. So again, not going to be like this. It's going to be banked or crabbed into the wind. And then slowly, eventually, we're going to have to start increasing our bank. And obviously this was a horrible representation. It was not a good circle at all. But we're going to have to start increasing the bank as we lose that crosswind and it turns completely into a tailwind. And then so our ground speed's going to be the fastest, and we're going to need our steepest bank. And so, let's just make sure I covered everything here. And then again, during this whole time, we want to make sure we're staying completely coordinated. We're not trying to use rudder to, help help with the maneuver. And then once we've completed two turns, the maneuver is completed, and then we can just roll out and climb away. So in terms of some common errors, just the usual to start off with, not doing our pre-maneuver checklist, not making sure we have an emergency landing spot, not checking for towers or traffic or anything like that. Another one is making sure, so this maneuver, I forgot to preface this in the beginning, unlike 8-zone pylons, which I guess has no use to a private student, but in any event, altitude needs to stay constant. So start this maneuver, 6 to 1,000 feet AGL. If MSL here is 500, let's say we're using 1,500 up to 1,000 AGL. We want to make sure we're level at that 1,500, not climbing, descending, or anything like that. We want to make sure our airspeed is also pretty stabilized as well. Throughout the maneuver, again, making sure that we're continuing to maintain altitude, because as we increase bank, we're going to have to increase back pressure as the vertical lift is transformed or more used, or is going to be needed more in the horizontal component to help us make that turn. So another failure to assess or understand wind direction. So I guess that's like if you start on a headwind for some reason, or on the upwind instead of a downwind. If maybe you didn't understand, which way the wind is coming from, and then I guess just not even doing the maneuver right. So if we don't have a constant radius turn, so for example, if we just kind of kept 30 degrees and didn't change our bank, well then we'd kind of go way out here, and it kind of looks something like this. So that would not be right. And then obviously we want to make sure we're being smooth, gentle on the controls, kind of nudging the airplane where we want it to be. We want to put any sort of abrupt loads on the airplane. And we want to make sure we're using coordinated aileron and rudder pressure, not just ailerons. So some hazards with this, obviously, distractions, make sure we're not distracted because we are kind of low to the ground. So if we have any sort of issue, we don't have a lot of time to rectify that, whether it's an engine failure or getting slow. And that's another thing, if we get into a stall in this situation, it's going to be quite challenging to recover. So we want to make sure that we're preventing that as best by possible, or as well as possible by one, making sure we have enough airspeed, and two, making sure that we don't put any sort of abrupt loads on the airplane, so that way we don't, get into a momentary accelerated stall. And then again, space orientation. I mean, people can, if you're just staring out at your plane, you could get disoriented and kind of lost. So if that happens, obviously just pitch level, roll the wings level, and then climb out and figure out what happened. And then another one is if we're not, paying attention to specifically other airplanes, we should have cleared the area, but we should still be vigilant in this maneuver. And then ideally, I typically do these to the left because, again, remember, right of way rules say that an airplane's going to pass you on the right. So, I'd rather do it on the left. Otherwise, if I'm doing it to the right, if someone is trying to pass me, I don't see why someone would be passing me down to the ground, but or that low to the ground. But it's good to use those good habits and stay with those good habits. And then another one is obviously obstacles and wire strikes, and specifically out here in the Midwest, where we don't have a lot of cities, it's just kind of cornfields. You have a lot of power lines and things like that, and those can kind of hide. So you want to make sure you're very vigilant, and not getting close to those at all. So to recap, those are turns around a point again. It's basically just a mirror or creating a circle with a uniform radii across a point. And the reason we do this is because we want to learn and understand the effect of wind and its effect on our ground track.